Welcome back to Two Bros, Two Bunkers. Today we're going to be talking about cluster munitions, the weapon that the Biden administration is proposing to send to Ukraine, and it's creating quite the controversy in the international space. Next, we will jump into Prigozhin and the Wagner Group's failed coup against the Russian government. Then we're going to jump into the UFO allegations brought forward by some whistleblowers. But first, into the cluster bombs. The Biden administration is proposing to send cluster munitions to Ukraine for Ukraine to use on the battlefield. And I'll be honest, when I first saw that people were upset about this, I didn't understand why they were upset. And Chris, you kind of opened me up to it a bit.
The thing that I think is like the biggest highlight that people need to know about them is that these cluster bombs have a failure rate of 5%. Like imagine if you went to buy, I don't know, like what's something that you buy in bulk a lot of times?
Mayonnaise.
Right. You go and you get your bulk package of mayonnaise that you go and grab, and like 5% of that mayonnaise is rotten.
It's gonna give you salmonella.
Like who thought that the defense industry produces all these bomblets where 5% don't work? Or it's like going into a pool and it's like, oh, there's only 5% urine in that pool.
That's actually a good day in the pool, though.
Right.
If it's only 5% urine. But I think that, like, to simplify it for my brain being new to this, so what you have is a bomb, a munition that comes out, and typically with any type of like a hellfire strike or whatnot, it's very pointed.
Yeah.
You get one explosion, which is actually why there's footage of members of Al-Qaeda actually outrunning a hellfire. They definitely get their ears blown out, but they're alive, right?
Yeah.
So the difference with the cluster is as it comes down, it explodes first in the air, and it fires off these, you can imagine them as golf balls, like 100 golf balls, but all of those are explosives as well. They scatter out, and they just rain down death.
Yes.
And it looks really cool, but the problem is, outside of collateral damage, is a lot of those golf balls, to your point of the failure rate, which is pretty high, are unexploded ordnance now, sitting on the ground, which is incredibly dangerous and needs to be removed in some capacity.
And you say how they look like golf balls. They kind of look like, a lot of times you look, it looks like a shuttlecock or something, like something that you'll play with in a game. You couldn't hear the word cock without losing it.
I forgot about shuttlecocks. Please, I'm sorry. Please.
I guess I wanted to like play.
No, you're right. I know it.
I wanted to.
Is it just called badminton? You don't say I want to play shuttlecock.
No one says that. No one says that.
You do. That's why everyone got mad at you with my cookout. Regardless of that, because you kept talking about shuttlecocks.
I can't shut up about shuttlecock. Get it out of my mind.
So they look though like a toy, is your point?
Yes. So kids go over and they try to pick them up and they try to mess with them. And even though they have a failure rate where they don't explode when they hit the ground, they still can explode when you pick them up.
Right.
So it's not like it's a dud in the terms that it didn't blow up when it was supposed to, but it's still a UXO, unexploded ordnance. So these things get fired from, everyone knows, or a lot of people have heard about HIMARS rocket artillery. Mm-hmm. These were originally designed to be fired out of the HIMARS. And that's why originally what the HIMARS is based on is a system called, I think it's the M270, and it was called a grid killer because it killed a whole grid square. So you'd fire it and it would you fire a couple of them and you'd basically neutralize anything in a whole 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid square.
So it's like you wipe out a whole platoon easily.
And that's what the point, I think the reason the Biden administration is deciding to send this new weapon system now is because Ukraine appears to be heading in, there's some problems maybe with the counteroffensive. Like it's not, they're gaining ground slowly, but it's not the sweeping progress that they would like to see. And I think that's what the U.S. is doing. They're like, okay, this isn't working. We'll send more. This might work. These are designed specifically to take out a Russian trench.
And actually, when you think about trench warfare, which it's insane that we're doing trench warfare. Like, come on, guys. 1920 called and they want their trenches back or their strategies. But yeah, if I were a Russian conscript on the ground in a trench, knowing now that Ukraine has cluster ammunition, that would be terrifying.
Yeah.
That would be really terrifying.
That'd be horrifying. And the way you could think about these things is they're like grenades. Each one is like a hand grenade. So it's basically dropping, and I forget the exact amount. I looked it up at one point, but I think it's about between 200 and 500 in each munition. So it's dropping like 200 grenades over a grid square. And the way trenches are designed, they've been this way since World War I, is they kind of serpentine. They like...
and the whole point would be like if
you dig the trenches like this, so that, because if you dug it straight, one unitary bomb could send shrapnel down the whole aisle, right? Mm-hmm. But by digging them cornered this way, that's what these cluster munitions can do, is they'll get in between all those different corners, and there's more of a chance that you'll clear out a trench.
You just get wiped out.
Right.
That'd be terrible. And the truth is, so looking into it, so cluster bombs have already been used by Russia on the battlefield. This isn't new to the Ukrainian battlefield right now. Russia has used it both against Ukrainian troops and in urban areas. So the truth is, Russia is using them. We're proposing that we allow Ukraine to use them. But there is an international convention against this. So 123 countries joined a convention in 2008 on cluster munitions specifically. This was an international treaty that went into force in 2010. So the convention bans the production, transfer, stockpiling, and use of cluster munitions in all circumstances, and requires relevant states to implement victim assistance measures. So meaning like if Ukraine does use these and the unexploded, or the XOs everywhere, it's on Ukraine, or actually maybe the US because we transferred it, to then go in and clean that area up and make it safe again. However, neither Russia, Ukraine, or the United States signed this treaty.
Out of the 120 countries. And for context, I think there's about 165, 170 recognized countries in the world.
Yeah, the rest are make believe.
So basically, the vast majority of countries, except for some of the most important ones, have signed on to it.
We won't need to get into it here, but the United States has a great history of not signing any of these agreements.
It's true.
We never sign.
Yeah.
You know why? Because we've been here for less than 300 years, and we're still running this place. Anyways.
Yes, but what's so we don't sign a lot of them because our argument sometimes is like, well, let's say Russia signed it, they're still going to create these weapons and use them anyway.
Correct.
But interestingly, we did destroy supposedly we destroyed some of our last chemical weapons very recently. That was in the news.
You know what I think about when I think about that?
I'm just trying to say the U.S., we're good.
We're doing the best we can with our sassy attitude. But what I think about that, though, is like we say we destroy them. Probably we also told people that we were getting rid of our cluster munitions, but all of a sudden we're like, actually, we're going to give it to Ukraine.
We did tell people we had decommissioned most of these munitions. We claimed that we had gotten rid of.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we never said that like a certain type of munition wasn't destroyed. But my understanding was, because I was looking into this when we first sent the HIMARS to Ukraine, I was like, well, what type of rocket are we sending? Are we sending, because there's the unitary bombs that we could send, and that's what we sent, the GPS guided surgical strike style ones, but there's also this huge stockpile of the cluster munitions. So I was asking people, and someone made a great Twitter thread where they went over how like we've destroyed most of our stockpile of cluster munitions, but apparently we must have found a couple of maybe.
We found some in that old bunker at Fort Drum that no one remembered.
What's this?
I mean, well, the truth is, like every military base you went to, when you had to go pick up a specialized ammo or something that you were going to fire off at the range, and you saw the amount of like old bunkers that hadn't been opened for decades, right? And it's still full of stuff. So
it's like where Indiana Jones goes, and there's the Ark of the Covenant.
It's in Fort Drum. The Ark of the Covenant is in Watertown, New York.
You know, where there's all those boxes.
Right, yeah.
Deep.
One of those boxes is full of endless cluster munitions powered by the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. But my question to you is like, one, do you think Biden will go through with it given the international pressure? And then two, do you think it will have an impact on their counteroffensive for Ukraine?
It's tough to tell. I think it could potentially. It's basically what we've done is we've sent them weapons that at every point are the most useful weapon for the tactical situation that they're encountering. So when they needed to move troops around the battlefield really fast, we sent them tons of M113s. We sent them, Strikers, all these different mechanized things that you could ferry troops around the battlefield.
Right.
They got that. Now they're at a point where, okay, we can move troops around, but we don't necessarily have and we have the weapons to strike their command centers, but we don't necessarily have the weapons to clear out trenches in modern warfare. Like, how do you do that today? And I think that just like how HIMARS seemed to have a big impact in helping them with their first counteroffensive, that was the weapon, and the Javelin was perfect for defending.
I was going to say the Javelin was in the beginning because we knew they were going to bring,
like those
Russia was going to be bringing their tanks.
Those cluster munitions might not have been as useful in the beginning of the stages of the war, but now it's what they need to clear out these trenches that they spent the last year creating. So the Pentagon briefing, General Pat Ryder said the Defense Department has multiple variants of the munition. The ones we are considering providing would not include older variants with unexploding rates that are higher than 2.35%. So they're claiming that they did destroy those older type of cluster munitions. These are a newer, less failure.
Right. Just a little bit of failure.
There's duds. You're shooting a couple blanks, but not.
You know what it makes me think
blanks.
of? Did you ever go to a mortar range?
Yeah.
Did you ever see a double feed?
No.
Okay, I did. So a double feed on the mortar tube is, the whole process of the mortar is pretty simple, right? They drop it, it goes out, right? The mortar round does. Sometimes though, because it's so loud, you drop one in and it doesn't go out, but you're in automatic mode, your brain keeps moving, so you drop a second one on top of it. So you have a dud that didn't go off, like it didn't shoot out, and now you have a live, healthy one on top of it, both of which are explosives, right? Just because the first one didn't fire out doesn't mean it can't explode. Now you have a second healthy one on top.
Yeah.
I was actually a safety driver in a Humvee when it happened. And dude, just watching those guys scatter back, they have no choice. Like, it's incredibly dangerous, right? Because you don't know, either of them could go off at any time. And you could have a huge casualty situation on your hands. I did have a fantasy when it happened though, because I was a Humvee driver. Right, I was just there. It's like I had water, fuel, things, whatever. It's a sweet gig. It's the best gig to have on range day because you're not out there sweating, whatnot. You're chilling, texting on your phone, having a good old time. And emergencies rarely happen in these situations. So when it happened, they're all yelling. They're like, "You got to get back." I don't know why, but I had this weird fantasy of me swerving my Humvee around, grabbing my buddy Race, who was on weapons platoon, pulling him in, and then I pull out a handgun and I shoot the tube. So it explodes, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "We gotta get out of here," and I just peel out, and then I get the Medal of Honor. Anyways, I digress.
Wait, so these are like the fantasies that you have when you're bored as heck on range?
When you're sitting there for hours.
Yeah.
In hours, and all you're doing is chain smoking cigarettes, drinking Monster Energy, all of it really bad for your health,
Not
right?
great.
None of it good. You're not drinking water, and you're thinking about, is there a way I can get Domino's at this range later? Which I drove a 7-ton to a Domino's once.
Where in this fantasy, why did you decide to shoot this? Because that would end the situation and save everyone?
No, because it was just like, I'm weird, man. And I'm weird. And I thought that's so weird.
That is weird.
I mean, that's so weird if someone did that. Like, anyways, I pull back from that. So, like, I think just knowing, like, double feet, I don't know the rate on it, but I sat in on a lot of like weapon platoon ranges because I loved watching it. Like, it's super cool. The stuff that they fire off and like how precise they can get with like just a tube and all these things. But I only saw one in 6 years in the Marines of a double feed, right? And that was a very scary moment. So the idea though that if we're using these cluster bombs at a high rate, like we're firing them everywhere, and let's say the failure rate is only 2%, and so let's give it a number of, there's 100 golf balls coming out that are explosive. Out of the 100, 2 of them are bad, like to where they're landing. They can still explode, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So they can explode at any time.
Right.
Considering the volume of cluster munitions that they're going to use, that is dangerous down the road once this is over.
When you talk about
That's what
the
I'm
amount, because I think it's part of an $800 million package. So, yeah, the ethical debate part of it is separate. There's like the ethics of it, which I think it's kind of hard to argue against the ethics of sending it to Ukraine because, well, they're being invaded by a country that is using cluster munitions against them already.
Yes.
So the whole ethical part of that debate, unless you want to play the like we're supposed to be better than them, mentality, but I don't know how you win a war with that kind of mentality. So I can understand especially from Ukraine's point of view, why they want the weapons. I can understand why the United States is sending them. I can also understand why the signatories, like these countries in Europe, are unhappy about the munitions being sent. I get that too.
Well, I doubt they're sending their kids to Ukraine for vacation. But I will say too, like to your point though, this is their land. So Jake Sullivan, the president's national security advisor, so he told reporters at the White House that Ukraine would not be using these munitions in some foreign land. Like this is their country they're defending. These are their citizens they're protecting. And they are motivated to use any weapon system that they have in a way to minimize risks to their citizens, right? So this is their backyard.
Yeah.
We're not saying to Ukraine's going to go use this in Belarus, or Ukraine's going to invade Russia with this. Right. They are using this to get Russia out of their country.
So they have an incentive to clean it up, first of all.
Yes.
Like a huge incentive. Essentially, it's guaranteed that they're going to clean this up, because it's not like you're America and you're in Iraq and you're firing these off and then you leave 20 years later and you're like, oh, I forgot about those cluster bombs.
If we can be honest, they're not going to clean it up. Our troops aren't going to clean it up. The best contracting company tied to a congressman in America is going to clean it up, and they're going to get paid a pretty penny for it.
In Iraq?
No, in Ukraine.
Oh, in Ukraine too?
Of course.
I'd be curious to know how much contracting they're doing, because I know the U.S. used a ton of contractors.
A lot. I mean, I was a contractor for 2 years in Afghanistan, and like, it makes sense. I mean, Putin has been using contractors since the moment he could. I mean, we call them mercenaries. The truth is, like Wagner Group, these other groups that exist are the same as like Dynacorp, Triple Canopy.
To the point of contractors and...
I was just going to say, segue. So, for those who don't know, the Wagner Group is one of the most, you could say, famous and nefarious mercenary companies in Russia. The founder, Prigozhin, is a Russian oligarch. He's actually one of the few Russian oligarchs who has a military power behind him. The rest are like oil barons or some sort of trade, and Putin has a lot more control over them. So Prigozhin was essential in the 2014 Crimea situation. Like, his troops got to the front lines, they did a lot of action, and he got a lot of respect and trust out of Putin in that. So,
and in Syria too. He had his troops. The whole thing with it, he started off as a hot dog man. He was a hot dog mercenary first.
Wait, what?
When he was young, he got arrested when he was 18, spent like 2 years in prison, petty theft. Then he got out of jail, went back for another 9. So he's around 28 when he gets out, and he's slinging hot dogs at this point. He starts up a hot dog business, and he's selling hot dogs left and right, like a New York dog on the side of the street. Like one of those wet dogs that we used to get when we worked in Manhattan.
Wait, so do you know how he actually segued into creating?
It's weird. It's very crazy how he segued into the military stuff, because what happens is he then uses the money from his successful hot dog business to start up luxury restaurant businesses around St. Petersburg. And that's when Vladimir Putin is just getting out of the intelligence services in Russia. And he's trying to get into politics. So he's like dining with all these people, diplomats, and wining and dining at these luxury places. And that's how he meets Prigozhin. And he likes the dude. So when Putin gets elected president, he then starts showering him with these billion-dollar contracts to cater the Russian military. And so then, at some point, Prigozhin meets this guy named Dmitry Ukin, who is he's a Russian Spetsnaz special forces guy who was fighting as a contractor in Syria, comes back. Dmitry Ukin starts up Wagner, and he's working as private security for Prigozhin. Prigozhin has these connections with Putin, so he kind of puts Wagner in touch with Putin, gets them all these military contracts, and then he kind of starts saying, like, I started Wagner, and he becomes the face of Wagner.
No way. So did he push the other guy out entirely, Dmitry? Do you know?
The dude disappears in like 2016. He made a public appearance with Putin, and I don't think he's been seen in public since 2016.
So he could either be vacationing somewhere on an island,
or he might be running Wagner's real operations. We have no idea.
I was gonna say, it makes sense. Like, given what you just told me on Prigozhin's personal background, he doesn't sound like a military strategist at all. So it would make sense that you would need to keep someone like Dmitry around, unless unless Dmitry's gone for some reason. Russians love to make people disappear. Yeah. If it's Putin behind it, you will fall out of a window. But fast forwarding into June of 2023. So on June 24th, news that honestly I think shocked everyone who heard it. Prigozhin was on the front lines of Ukraine. He's been on the front lines of Ukraine since this invasion started. He's been very public. He posts on his Telegram all the time. He makes videos talking crap to Zelensky. And then slowly, though, over the last, I want to say 6 months, people started to notice that he was really criticizing the Russian military leadership a lot. He was doing stuff that you normally don't see in Russia. In Russia, most public figures toe the line. They do not create any type of discourse against powerful Russia. They'll do it behind closed doors, but they do not do it publicly.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think he was doing this publicly because in his mind, he might have felt that Putin viewed him as a right-hand man, and he had some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card, right? So he continued to press this, and ultimately, he accused the Russian Ministry of Defense of firing on his troops.
Yeah.
He even went as far as to allege that they had a secret morgue where they were murdering Wagner troops and hiding the bodies in the morgue. So he gets mad, and on June 24th, he takes all of his men in Ukraine and starts marching them to Moscow and making wild claims. I mean, he was saying that not only is he going to take these 2 Russian generals out that he hated, he even said that there would be a new Russian president.
Yeah, well, so he didn't say that, but on his it's like his Wagner press group said that at one point, so it wasn't technically him, but he was at the point where he thought, I think, that he was going to take over Moscow, and he had them say that like, because Putin had just made the statement that he was a criminal, so then their network released, too bad for Papa, Putin, he's gonna be replaced.
Did they actually call him Papa?
Yeah, that was like.
That's funny. They call him Papa. I call him Poopin' Putin, because he pooped himself.
Have you ever, when you were in the military, did you ever want to rebel?
Yes.
Did you ever think about maybe getting like a little coup together?
Not a coup. The way I rebelled was by stealing things. I think that's how every Marine rebels. You'd steal from headquarters company.
That was your little mutiny.
Yeah, and anytime we're on an army base, you stole everything you could from the United States Army as a Marine, because we knew we joined the wrong branch. We have no bonuses. We get the worst benefits. Everyone's mean to us all the time. We see you Army guys with AC, Gatorades, skating on by. We have hot water bottles that we try to cool off in damp socks. So we steal things. I mean, it was like Oliver Twist, to where like your NCOs are like some master criminal and you're all orphans, and like you come back to the vehicle and he's like, "What'd you get me today? What you got?" And you have like an old Alice pack, and he's angry because that's worthless. But he's also happy we stole it from the Army.
You didn't steal things from the Army?
100% I did.
Really?
Yeah. We had one
Let me
Marine.
ask you something. What branch would be the most likely to start a mutiny, if one did?
In my mind?
Yeah.
Honestly, it wouldn't be the Marine Corps.
I thought it would be.
I think, oh man. I was gonna say it'd be
the Coast Guard?
I was gonna say it'd be no, they're great. They're shit hot. I was gonna say I think it would be the Army because you guys are so unorganized and undisciplined. That was just me taking a shot. But I do think it would be the Marines, because even when I was at boot camp, I remember our drill instructor was like, "There's the American flag, there's the Marine Corps flag, there's your state flag," and he's doing this little ramble, but he's like, "The one you are loyal to first is that Marine Corps flag."
Oh.
He's like, "That supersedes everything else. You are loyal to the Corps. We all bleed green. We look out for each other, blah, blah." And I remember in my head, I was like, I don't know if it works that way, man.
I don't think it works that way.
But at the same time, I loved it. I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm like $1.60 wet. I look like a victim of starvation."
I'm just picturing you and your unit marching down on DC.
We're doing it because we're all boots. We're doing it in perfect, marching, right? Like, we're pretty about it. And, like, then we just get the crap beaten out of us by the National Guard or anyone else. Like,
yeah,
but
if they show up.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what the route that Prigozhin took. And he did take over on his march to Moscow, which he called the March of Justice. So he never openly positioned it as a full coup, right?
I like that, a cuckoo.
It wasn't a coup.
It wasn't a cuckoo.
It was a baby coup.
It was a little cuckoo.
Yeah. So the general that he was most upset with was, I'm going to butcher this name.
Sergei Shoigu.
Shoigu. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, he went at him saying that he poorly planned the war in Ukraine, that the entire situation was embarrassing for the Russian military. And his big claim, again, was that Shoigu killed thousands of the most combat-ready Russian soldiers in the first days of the war. The mentally ill scumbags decided it's okay, we'll throw in a few thousand more Russian men as cannon fodder. They'll die under artillery fire, but we'll get what we want. And that's why, in Prigozhin's mind, it's become a protracted war. So Prigozhin was upset at the invasion strategy. He was upset at the amount of men dying on his side. But he didn't seem to voice all this in the beginning of the actual invasion. Back when it started, it feels like this was a culmination of frustration and resentment.
And also, I think he was in his head, I think, and this is obviously, we don't know what really is going on, but we're just going to kind of speculate based on some of the facts and piece things together the best we can.
Yeah.
But based on what I'm seeing, Prigozhin his power was growing, and he's seeing that. He's like, I can get away with saying all this stuff on Telegram. He grew his Telegram subscribers to over 700,000 people.
Wow.
Who most of them are probably in Russia, who are following him, and he's posting constantly. He's seeing, like, I can say negative things, implying that Putin is a piece of shit, implying it without really saying it. I can get away with it. And he's seeing, you know what I mean? Like, he's keep trying to push the envelope, and he's seeing he can get away with it. And there's no pushback, really, until there starts being pushback where the Russian Ministry of Defense, his forces, between 25,000 and 8,000 Wagner mercenaries, a lot of them from prison camps, ruthless group of war criminals.
Completely undisciplined.
Yeah. So what the Russian Ministry of Defense does is they start cutting off ammunition to him. Imagine if you just didn't get resupply one week, and you're like, what the heck? And they're making, obviously they're going to make some excuse, but really what they're trying to do is starve him of his power, because they see that he's getting out of control and he has all this leverage because he's captured Bakhmut. He's a hero in Russia. And
they love him. The Russian people love him.
Absolutely. He's PR. He is very good at PR. Like, he's showing up on the front lines in fatigues. He gets it. He gets how to play that game.
He was a restaurateur.
Right. So he
knows the show.
Right. He knows how to, like, how the owner of the restaurant comes out and does the little show and dance. He does it.
Drapes the towel over.
So they're not giving him ammo, and that's when he starts making threats and saying, I'm going to pull my troops out of Bakhmut. And I think he's realizing that they're crushing down on him. And I don't know if you heard about this, but they at one point tell him, it's June 10th, you have until July 1st to sign this paper that makes all of your forces under Russian Ministry of Defense command, which would basically make him
worthless.
Right, exactly. Right. So he refuses to sign that, and that's when I think he realizes, he's like, I have 3 weeks to either they're going to kill me probably because they're starving us of supplies. Like, I think that's the moment when he realizes he needs to do something.
I think what I find interesting about that is on June 10th, he gets this kind of ultimatum pressure of what's happening. He sees his peers doing it. And then within like 2 weeks, that's when he starts his march to Moscow.
And the U.S. actually saw this coming. They saw that he was putting together ammunition. He got at least 9 main battle tanks. He had anti-air defense systems, a Pantsir anti-air system. He had artillery pieces. He had about 300 pieces of equipment. And he claimed that he had 25,000 soldiers, but the CIA and
that's too many, right?
They claimed that he had probably closer to 8,000 troops with him. And so they go to Rostov and they take over the military district there, which is like the equivalent of if you took over Philadelphia and then started marching on DC. Mm-hmm. He takes over there.
And Rostov gave him no resistance.
Right.
At all. And actually there's videos of the people shaking his hand. People love watching his troops move their tanks around. He's kind of treated, like, to your point, like a war hero. And I think that they love it because in their mind, here's a true Russian. He loves the Russian people, and he's going to get, as we say in America, he's going to drain the swamp in Moscow, right? And the rapidness of this is insane. So it was Saturday at 1 a.m. is when Putin allegedly was informed that there was an attempted armed rebellion, right? But by that point, Prigozhin's Wagner group had already entered Rostov. They were already there, right? So they started their movement fast, and I think it took time for the Russian military to catch up on what was happening. And I would also assume that people were afraid to tell Putin, because I have a feeling he's kind of like the Hitler effect. He might harm the messenger a little bit. But by 7:30 a.m., so 1 a.m. on the 24th, early in the morning, Putin is made aware that this is happening.
Yeah.
By 7:30 a.m., Prigozhin publicly claims control of Rostov-on-Don. And then by 9:30 a.m., they continue to Moscow. And then that's where things continue to develop. Everyone's reacting. I posted a video about it. And no joke, the whole thing is over by 8 p.m.
The next day.
Same day.
Yeah, that day.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
correct.
nuts.
So 8 p.m.
I stayed up all night that night, and I followed the whole thing. And it's funny because you're seeing everything unfold on Twitter, and then it takes the mainstream media, it takes them another hour before they'll report it. But you're seeing everything happening because he's putting everything on Telegram live.
Yes.
So you're seeing that, and then you're seeing it on Twitter, and there's this app or something on Twitter that you just have to, a bot, where you just have to say like translate. And so it immediately translates
to Russian.
Yeah, to English. So you'll see the video of Prigozhin talking at the Rostov headquarters, Southern Military District Command, and immediately you get the translation. It's like this is something that you never would have gotten. It's like a historical, weird.
I feel like it's good and bad. Like it's good because we're getting real-time information that older generations never got. It's bad because you do need to take the time to parse it out.
Yes.
Find out what's relevant, what's real, what's misinformation, what's... You get my point, right? So the big picture.
This is really... I'm glad you brought that up because I want to talk, before we get into the rest of the coup and like the aftermath, I want to talk about the fun part, which is, okay, talk about misinformation or just craziness. Like almost immediately people started saying that Prigozhin and Putin were doing this as some kind of KGB theater. They're working in cahoots with each other. So I want to know what you think of that. So
I remember seeing those too, and I'm like, no way. Like Putin would never allow this, right? Because he's all about strength. He's all about his perception, and this definitely made him look weak for a short period of time, right? So by 8 p.m. the same day, Prigozhin strikes a deal through the president of Belarus by proxy of Putin. So Putin's speaking to the president of Belarus talking to Prigozhin. The deal alleged that Prigozhin's going to stand down. He's going to hand his troops over to the Russian military. He's going to live in exile in Belarus and become fat and happy. But yeah, I'm seeing all over comment threads and YouTube and Twitter, people like, this must be a bigger plan between him and Putin. This is it's kind of like what Hitler did during one of his assassination attempts, where he pretended to be dead to see who pops up.
Oh, who's happy about it.
And then he had those people executed. So what's interesting, though, is at first I was like, there's no way. Like, Putin would never allow this. It made him look weak. It shows that Russia's unstable. However, recent reports now are insane. So
yeah,
Prigozhin allegedly did go to Belarus, land in Belarus. The president of Belarus was like, he's here. We've got Prigozhin. They set up camps for his Wagner troops to come and live in Belarus. They were going to stay with Prigozhin. But on Monday morning, Prigozhin was in St. Petersburg, Russia, because that's where the Wagner headquarters were, with his own armed security detail, his men, not like Russian police or something. And he met with the Russian FBI equivalent to recollect his confiscated weapons, gold bars, and money. So when he fled, allegedly, to Belarus, his home was raided, his offices were raided. They took his weapons, they took his cash, like it was over $100 million worth of cash. They took his gold, they took everything. Putin put an arrest warrant on him. Then he's in St. Petersburg getting his guns back, getting his gold back. None of his troops ever showed up to Belarus, so they're still with him. Now I don't know where left is left, or I'm confused.
It's unprecedented, I think, is the way to look. You've never seen something like this. We don't know, was it part of the deal that he struck with Putin, that he had the right to do this, to come back and get his stuff? Does he still have leverage? Was this just a ceasefire between them?
We also know 2 Russian generals since this happened have gone missing. One that was closer connected to Prigozhin. He went missing most likely because he stood up and said, I'm with Prigozhin. Surovikin is the general who's a briefcase holder.
Okay.
Who's now missing.
Right.
And hasn't been
So
seen.
do you think that lends credence to the idea that it was to just surface?
That's what
The thing
makes
that-
this like so hard for me is I want to say I'm starting to think maybe, but at the same time, I know that while we're talking about this, 8 new things could come out. And it might even be maybe Putin is using this as an opportunity to create mass confusion for our intelligence agencies, as well as confusion on the ground in Ukraine.
I love conspiracy theories because I think they're fun.
You know,
and we're about to get into aliens in a little bit.
They're my favorite thing in
They're
the world.
so fun.
They're
I
my
love them.
favorite
And I
thing.
love to think about just what would go into making something as elaborate of a scheme as this. And there's so much kind of just some criminals put a lot of thought and planning into what they do, and I find that fascinating. So it appeals to me, the idea that Prigozhin and Putin got together behind the scenes and they were like, hey man, you pretend to take your troops here and I'll do this, and then like at the end of it, what? Like,
Right,
we showed them. we
No,
really
who doesn't like you then, Putin?
what a ruse.
We are rusing them. No,
The Stanislavski method really worked here.
And that's how conspiracy theories are born. What I think, honestly, if they're colluding with each other now, I think what it would have been is that Prigozhin got hot-headed. He was angry. The march was real, right? He did come to his senses in a conversation with the president of Belarus. And Putin would be using this now as an opportunity, like a silver lining, versus having planned it all. You know, when you back into any big conspiracy theory like Operation Northwoods, which gets everyone's attention all the time because it was the first real, truly declassified document showing a plan presented by the Department of Defense to President Kennedy at the time, proposing that we do fake terrorist attacks in Miami, in D.C., to start a war against Fidel Castro, right? So this got everyone, now everything's a false flag in everybody's mind. However, when you actually dive into it and you find out the man behind it, Edward Landon, America's first like super spy, he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be part of the plan. He was kind of like Prigozhin. He was given an impossible deadline to get something done. And so he was just writing up the most insane ideas that he had no intention of making real.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But now everyone thinks, oh, the CIA,
Right.
the NSA, this, that,
dude,
right?
You're so on point because you're at like, there's all these contingency plans that the military, the CIA, they all come up with, and then people find these contingency plans that some low-level analyst created,
Right.
and they're like, oh, everything's a psyop.
Right.
Like, no, this warlord who is a frickin' war criminal took his band of prisoners who were in prison for murder and worse, and he tried to take over Moscow with this group of armed rebels. Like that, Occam's razor, that's the least nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I could see the world where, again, like to anyone who, you know, in the military, in the Marines, they would always say, stay semper Gumby, always flexible. You know, Gumby, he's flexible. But I think that in the military, you're always trying to turn a mistake into a silver lining. You're trying to find something out of it, right? To spin, especially to your leadership.
Putin's in a position where at this point he needs to make the best out of it.
And he probably did see Prigozhin was beloved by the people. Like, I'm sure Putin wanted to kill Prigozhin. He may not be able to do that easily, though.
And it might not be in his favor to kill him at this point. Because if he kills him, this dude, like, we don't live in Russia, so we probably don't understand the amount of support this guy has.
Right.
It would be like if you killed, who's one of the most famous?
Mattis.
Right. Mattis, and he did have very like public disagreements with presidents.
Yes.
And it would be as if, but if he was killed, imagine the
like if
backlash.
when he was critiquing Trump, if Trump all of a sudden tried to put him in prison,
right.
it would be a whole thing.
It wouldn't be in his favor. It wouldn't even help him. So
Yeah.
Putin might be in a position now where, so people are looking at it from the outside and it's hard, like why isn't he having him killed, or why is he allowing him to be in St. Petersburg? They must be working together. Like you said, maybe it makes more sense that it's just in his interest to not kill him.
Maybe Putin is becoming a little less window pushy. He's starting to realize, wait a minute, I can't keep pushing everyone out of windows, because if I do that, then I have no friends left.
He's had a change of heart.
Maybe one of his daughters was like, hey, Dad, remember when they tried to blow me up in that car bomb? And he's like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. They're like, chill, chill, chill. maybe if you push Prigozhin out the window, who's next? How many friends do you have then? And then he goes, you're right. Prigozhin always gave me the best chicken cutlet, the best Parmesan sandwich. I don't know how Russians talk.
I don't know what they eat
and then
either.
he turns to his daughter and he says,
you don't know what they eat.
Right, and then he turns to his, well, if in my terrible American brain, it's just mush. But then he turns,
it's potatoes.
It's completely unseasoned everything. And then he turns to Prigozhin and he says, "Ya ti blah, blah," which means I love you in Russian. I do know that.
Does it?
Yes. I was a single Marine. And so he says that him and Prigozhin kind of bro. I don't think Russians hug. They do like 80 kisses on the cheeks. They spit vodka in each other's mouth and they move on. So I think, truthfully, this one's a hard one to see what's going to come next because, as I said, while we're talking about it, the players are going to change rapidly. The names are going to change. These generals like Surovikin, who went missing, might reappear out of nowhere and turns out nothing happened to him. Or he reappears covered in bruises. Or he falls out of a window. Prigozhin also might not be out of this yet either. Like,
so there's people saying it might be a kind of a ceasefire where, so to put a bow on the whole timeline of it, Prigozhin goes from Rostov through another district that I'm forgetting the name of how to pronounce it, but he makes his way quickly through there. Again, same situation. The National Guard stands down. But for some reason, when he gets within 100 miles of Moscow he stops. And so I know there's video footage of his convoy that was leading up to Moscow is getting hit by airstrikes. And also the road is getting hit by airstrikes ahead of the way. So that's got to put a damper on your coup.
People did die.
Yeah.
It's alleged by Russian military bloggers in Russia that his men killed at least 25 Russian soldiers.
Okay.
Probably who were in aircraft.
Right. Two attack aircraft at least, and a couple of transport aircraft, and at least one plane, I heard.
So that's where I find it hard to believe that this is like a false flag
because they both confirmed that they killed helicopter pilots. Prigozhin said he did it.
Yep.
Putin said it happened, and there's video evidence of it. So it would seem unlikely.
What do you think it's like in Russia? So like, when a U.S. service member passes,
yeah,
like they get, like the chaplain comes, like you get the commanding officer to come, you get this big thing. Do you think in Russia they just get like kind of a text?
Like a telegram
Because the Russians
chat.
seem so cold. They forced all these kids who had no idea they were even going into war to war, and the parents didn't even know. I could see the Russians being like, your child died in combat. And they're like, why was my child in combat? They're like, you now owe Mother Russia 50 rubles in tax to pay for funeral.
And he was killed by another Russian.
By Prigozhin. Yeah. But then the mom's like, oh, Prigozhin, I love him so much.
That's what I don't get. How can he be a hero when
he just killed Russian?
But I think it's because I don't understand the mentality that they have.
Russians?
Yeah.
You know who does? No one.
Yeah.
Crazy, man.
It's a little, well,
no, I'm kidding.
It seems like they're a country run by criminals.
I want to say to any Russians who heard me say that, I don't mean that. You're not crazy. You're doing the best you can. We're really proud of you. But
so to end that,
speaking of conspiracy, though, I tried to segue as cool as you did last time.
No, that's good.
A whistleblower, actually, allegedly multiple whistleblowers have approached members of Congress stating that in their work with NASA and other government departments, whatever, that they have information that we've made contact with aliens, that we have alien technology, and that it's not just being kept from the American people, but it's also being kept from Congress.
And here's what it says. Is the whistleblower David Grush, 36, everyone's talking about him right now, this went viral, a decorated former combat officer in Afghanistan, so he's got some weight to him. He's a veteran of the National Geospatial and Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. He served as Reconnaissance Office representative. He's been doing this for a while. This is the guy that did the leak. And Grush said the recoveries of partial fragments through and up to intact vehicles have been made for decades. Through the present day by the government, its allies, and defense contractors, they've had these vehicles. Analysis, he says, has determined that the objects retrieved of exotic origin, non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or unknown origin, so these could just be sea creatures maybe that have always been on Earth. But so in filing the complaint, is represented by a lawyer.
Well, and to add to it, on June 26th, in an interview, Senator Marco Rubio stated that multiple individuals have corroborated his story. And this has added even more weight now to the situation. And so to kind of unpack what you just delivered, so he's claiming that these alien or unknown origin ships or vehicles have crashed. We've collected them in secret, and we've been trying to reverse engineer them, understand them. And his concern is not even that it's a secret from the American public, but that it's also a secret from our leaders, that they're not aware of it.
That's basically what he's saying, is that the deep state or the intelligence apparatus, they see the president and all these elected officials as revolving chairs. That they come and they go, and this group of people in the know about these, it's been kept separate from them. That's what, and that makes it more believable. It's really the only way you could believe this, is that it's kind of kept separate, and it's the secret part of the government that's doing this. Well, and this comes as the culmination of the last 2 years have just seen a flurry of all these different reports and video evidence and fighter pilots coming out talking on Joe Rogan, talking about how they saw UFO tic tacs. So this is kind of like a culmination of all these different stories about UFOs coming out. There's
also, to kind of like not diminish his claims, but there are also crazy patents submitted by the Department of Defense that I don't want to say they explain some of the crazy anomalies that pilots have seen. A lot of people have seen the footage of, we can show it, but there's a fighter pilot, he sees an object and it just moves all over the place. It's crazy how it moves. It was completely unknown what it was.
The Tic Tac?
What is this weird thing you keep saying, this Tic Tac?
So I watched the Joe Rogan interview where they call it a Tic Tac. The fighter pilot calls it a Tic Tac. But I'm wondering what video you're talking about.
I can pull it up. It is called the Tic Tac, huh?
Okay, so we're talking about the same thing. All these different...
Yeah, and you can't really tell what it is on the screen, but the way it moves is wild, right? And so...
Oh, and you're saying that the DoD is coming...
Right, there are these weird... like one of the patents that the DoD has is an apparatus that sits in the air and is completely camouflaged. Like you can't see it. And so it's either that this is alien tech or it's actually our tech that we haven't shared yet.
That's the best argument against this being aliens, is that the DoD has created some advanced technology that, again, maybe the military doesn't even know about, but somewhere, fighter pilots don't know about. It's not like they would rate that.
They would not be privileged. Right.
So that's the best argument, is that, Area 50...
And also knowing how our agencies work, the ones who work in secret, they don't care. Like, they will test it even to see how a pilot reacts to it. Like, if it's our tech. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I could see that happening. The other thing with David, how do you say his last name?
Grush?
Grush, what a fun name.
Grush.
Dude,
I feel like I'm illiterate when I read names sometimes. I'm like, it's Gruscha. Anyway, Grush.
Grush. We'll go with Grush. Yeah. So the other thing with David Grush that you and I were talking about a little bit earlier is he does not allege that he personally has seen any of this. Right. He's saying that it's other people within these agencies that let him know, right? And he became kind of privy. I'm not fully sure how he's claiming he became aware.
Have you ever had a private come up to you and say something like that? Like,
when I first got into the intel world, which was just company level intel cell, very like not as cool as some like the HET guys and stuff like that. But I did meet a guy when I was doing my Raven course who was like just basic intel in the Marines. He was like I think he was an E3, could have been E4, it doesn't matter. His rank held no weight in my world. So, but I was asking him, like, do you actually get anything from the SIPRnet? Like anything like cool? Because I was thinking you wouldn't. And man, he loved it. He was like, yeah, I mean, they have who shot Kennedy in there. They got everything. And he was going with it though, man. Like he wanted us to believe him. Do you know what I mean? And I think
But he probably could find a lot of shit on there that's real. Unless he doesn't have access to SIPR.
Well, that's where Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning found all that stuff.
And that Air Force kid.
In the Air Force in the SIPRNet, right? And obviously we know it's pretty easy to steal that intel without anyone knowing.
Yeah. He must have not even had access to have to make shit up.
Yeah, David, you didn't have SIPRNet access? No, but what I was saying to you earlier is it makes me think like I'm at a bar and I meet a guy, because David has a strong background, right? And I actually had nights like this in Manhattan where I would meet a writer for like the New York Times who like really has a credible background, knows their stuff, and they, like, I feel like I'm in a movie sitting in a tiny bar and I'm like, what's the real scoop here, bub? Yeah. Because I'll have these guys drinking like, dude, you don't even get it, man. They control everything. Trust me, I'm gonna blow this story up. Nothing ever happens, right? And so it's hard for me right now, based on his claims, to think that this is alien tech versus layers of telephone game within the agency. And also, to your point earlier, they don't know where it came from. That doesn't mean it came from extraterrestrial life form, right? Because one question I do have, and this isn't scientific, and I'm going to pop an Altoid while I think about this. Isn't it weird that all the aliens crash in America?
They don't, though. There's just recently in Iraq, in Mosul, they captured an image of a weird drone, like metallic thing flying over Mosul. So maybe.
But did it crash in Mosul?
Well, we wouldn't know if they have. We wouldn't know.
I don't mean
probably China has a bunch of these things.
I don't mean to laugh, but I like that when I'm like, they only crash in America. You're like, they don't though.
No,
you're pulling a David right now. No. You're like, actually, from what I heard,
I know a guy.
Like, okay? I know this dude.
That's the worst part. Is it's like he comes in, and he's just like, I know a guy.
What if, honestly, like, not to derail too much, what if he was like, listen, Senator Rubio, I've been watching these TikToks and they make a lot of sense. And he's got conspiracy TikTok up. And because we know congressmen, just because they're in Congress doesn't mean they're that bright, right? What is that?
This is in Mosul.
That's
what they call it. Some
little orb?
Weird.
That looks like a BB.
Could just be a BB for all
I bet this little dum-dum tossed a BB in front of his camera and snapped. I don't want to discredit it, but
so
that's what I'm saying. That's
part
hard.
of the thing against, if we're going to talk about skepticism about it.
Yeah.
One of the things is recently our thermal cameras and equipment have jumped up, become more advanced. So maybe they're picking up blips in their. It might be mistakes. As they become more sensitive, they also are more prone to picking up things that aren't there.
Correct.
Is one of the arguments against it.
Well, it's like when digital cameras started to get better, and people would see dust flying in front of the lens, and they're like, "That's a spiritual orb."
You know what I learned is pretty much everyone in the military has a UFO story. Just a lot of people, at least in my old unit, like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who didn't. You know, there's someone who grew up in Georgia, and they're like, "Yeah, when I was a kid, there was that one time we were out just under the stars,
picking corn,
picking a couple cobs." That's what they say.
That's how they talk.
And no, you didn't come across many UFO
you were still
types.
Half an accent when you go no.
No.
No, when I was in, I'm trying to think. Me personally, when I was in, I never saw.
I think. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But like the reason I think a lot of people, you're out on guard duty or you're out on patrol, and a lot of times you're in the woods at night training. And you'll see like a test aircraft go by, and people. I think the military is a lot of people in the military are wired to believe.
All right, on that front, then the craziest story that someone told me that I did not witness. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, but he's a good friend. I don't think he would lie to me about this, but he was stationed in Djibouti, Africa, and there's a lot of weird stuff that they allow to happen in Africa to not disrupt everything that goes on. So one day he claims that he was on basic duty, like standing guard at the runway, the tarmac, where the planes land. Sorry, my brain, man. And he claims that this Russian, like this old Soviet era Russian cargo plane that was modified and had like these kind of like, he didn't say they were like strobe lights, but it had like this weird lights fitted on the wing. It landed and the back opened, and then these lights just went on real bright so no one could see what was being offloaded. So he's like, we couldn't see what was being offloaded, we couldn't see what was being put on. So he claims he called it in, and they told him, this is standard. You're not privileged to know what's on that plane, what's happening there. Just do your job. And he was really freaked out by it. To me, though, I'm like, I was a very different kind of Marine. I was a guy who would have seen that and been like, oh, it's crazy, and would have turned around because it's too bright. I wouldn't even care.
Yeah, I'm the same type of. I was the type of soldier that I'm like, oh, there's something I'm not supposed to know or look at.
And the truth is, I don't want to know.
Exactly, I don't want to know.
Yeah,
this isn't alien. What else?
No, that's all he had.
Okay, so this isn't alien related, but to talk about conspiracy theories that did turn out to be kind of true that I know about, there was. Right before we deployed, and I can talk about this now because the war is over or whatever, but right before we deployed, there was like conspiracies going around, stories that we were using live goats and killing them and shooting them, chopping their legs off to simulate combat.
Yep.
And then had the medics go treat them. And this was done in secrecy. Like the PETA was protesting, saying it was happening, and we were all on orders to not talk about it. No one was allowed to talk about it. I'm pretty sure the people that went and did these exercises had to sign NDAs, but they had like live goats that they would chop their legs off and then have the medics tourniquet them to give them some kind of sense of what it would be like to put a tourniquet on somebody that's bleeding out, and how do you stop that bleeding? Because how else do you simulate that?
So I can verify for you that's all true. We weren't told to keep it secret. We used pigs in the
right.
And then the Marines didn't do it. The corpsmen that we had from the Navy, they had to do it. So they would take a pig and like slice its artery, and they had to save the pig's life. And if you didn't, that's like a failure. Yeah,
I know what happened because and this is like I know a guy, but this was my buddy in my squad. He was assigned to guard the place and make sure no PETA people or anyone came in and tried to free these goats. So when I knew it was happening, and one of our medics also went and did the training. So the government does keep some things secret on a small. So if you were to blow that up onto a bigger scale, they'll keep killing goats and pigs secret. Maybe they'll also keep.
That's actually a really brilliant connection right there. It's a pretty big jump. I'm giving you. No, it is. No, it's not. Like I'm giving you credit that. So the only reason I knew the pig thing was real. We had heard about it. We were never told to keep it private or something. We were just told this is what happens, and we didn't know to believe it, right? However, one of our docs, I'm not going to name him, but he was like a sweet baby angel of a personality. This guy was just a pure soul, right? And they all had the 29 Palms. They all had to go do that, I guess. And we only knew because we're back at like the barracks area. And dude, he had 1,000-yard pig stare. Like he was traumatized so bad.
You don't want that medic in your platoon.
We were just like
if he can't handle that.
So because he did fail. So because he failed, they moved him to a non-combat unit.
Figured.
The thing, though, is, like, I gotta be honest, in my mind, mentally, like, if they were trying to train me to tourniquet a human with a pig, I don't view pigs the same way in combat. You can't stab my sweet little piggy.
So you'd be more upset about pigs.
I would be the guy who took a stand, and I took the knife, and I was like, no. But what I really want to know, knowing the way that military instruction happens, like you sometimes get really great teachers. Other times you get the NCO who like, dude, he barely passed high school and he's not good at this. So I do imagine someone being like, your next move is you take this goat right here, and he just picks it up, and the goat screams like, it will scream because we are not giving them morphine. And then he just awkwardly hacks its leg. He's like, it will fight. You need to push through. And you're just like, how are you normal with? You know what I mean? And then that's the same instructor who walked by, and you have like the young corpsman panicking. He's like, well, I guess we got a little sweet pea on our hands. And he stabs the pig like 8 more times.
It's a really good way to weed out the because if you don't want a medic that's going to see blood for the first time and go like, bleh, you want
Actually, a medic. I would love to remake parts of Band of Brothers when the corpsman's helping a guy, or even Saving Private Ryan when the corpsman's trying to save lives on the beach. But as he's doing it, he's always going, he's like, and he keeps going. He's like, he's holding back, but he's doing his job. But he's just like, he's like, oh my God, I'm sorry, man.
You're looking now, you're like, are you serious? Yeah. Have you done this before?
Yeah, I love the idea of the corpsman being like, oh my God, dude.
He's like, oh, that's gross, man.
He's like, your leg. Oh, I can't. It's like hamburger meat, and he's just like wrapping it up. And then it would be even better if another corpsman runs up to pack him, because in the movie,
he's like, oh, that's bad.
No, the other corpsman runs up and goes, oh my God. And then when he sees the first,
I can't even.
One of the corpsman's when he goes, the other was like, stop. I'm gonna do it too. But yeah, I digress.
This is a digression.
The hard part, I think the hard part about this situation with David and what he's blown the whistle on is that, one, we're not getting a lot of information on it because everything he's saying is going straight to congressional committees. And they're not just going to immediately run out and say what he's saying because they need to verify, they need to look into it. It also might be that he's telling the truth, and right now he's about to get Snowdened and he's going to have to move to Mother Russia and hide.
I think because he is saying that it's stories that he heard from other people down the line, that protects him. I think, and you've never ever heard of somebody, you've never heard of a whistleblower coming out about this alien stuff who gets killed or disappears. It just doesn't happen. Those fighter pilots,
that's true,
didn't get in trouble.
Actually, but is that a sign that he's not giving us anything worthwhile? Because Snowden's like, they listen to your cell phones, and the NSA lost their minds.
If there was a real alien whistleblower who dropped some intel, they would have to leave the country, you would think.
That needs to be the barometer of our whistleblowers.
A lot of people say that that's China's drones.
I was just going to say, I feel like a lot of it would be misidentified aircraft, because I've watched many interviews with old members of the Air Force team, Project Blue Book, that were working on identifying UFOs. They were tasked to do so. In a lot of it, they would say, like, we don't know exactly what it is, but we don't think this is extraterrestrial. Like, every government that's modern is working on new types of aircraft, new types of spy craft, drones, everything, right? Drones are super in right now.
Yeah.
They are so hot.
They are the hottest.
The hottest. But there's so many different variations of that are going around, that are being
And you see
flown.
the ones that you can buy online, like the DJI drones, and they're pretty impressive. They're really cool.
Yeah.
And then you look at that and you think, well, if that's what you can personally buy for $300, imagine what the secret programs in China and in the United States have for $25 million, right? The capabilities of those drones must be.
Well, all right, if we can be real here,
insane.
the Chinese drones are just cheap knockoffs. Like, they're not good at making anything. Their aircraft carrier has like cracks in it.
Yes.
So the cool drones that we're seeing.
But it's still, whatever they have is still cooler than what I can buy.
I imagine right now the Chinese Ministry of Defense, or whatever they call themselves, like taking DJIs and modifying them to look cool, and then they're like, no, fly that over Nevada and see what happens. Like, they just want to look like they're
like
on
with
top
the
of it.
balloons that they sent over.
Yeah, and then of course the moment the government's like, oh shoot, we need to pay attention to balloons, they shoot down a bunch of them, and then they realize we can't keep shooting down all these balloons. There's a lot of. You know what that made me wonder though? Every time we fly in the continental U.S., are we at risk of bumping into a balloon and going down?
I don't know. I don't think there's that.
There's a lot of balloons. There's a
there.
lot. Think of every college university that releases a weather balloon. They must have to go to a certain altitude to avoid planes.
That whole balloon thing was nuts.
The balloon thing was
that
wild.
They used an F-22 to take it down.
So I think,
and that China was out there doing that.
Well, so they had to use the F-22 though, because those balloons are so massive, you can't just shoot it with a bullet. It won't come down. But here's my question to you: do you think David Gersh is telling the truth?
I think he absolutely, from his perspective at the very least,
right.
He definitely heard this stuff. Whether that's true or not, we don't. The thing, he doesn't have any real evidence, at least as far as I know. Maybe he's presenting it to Congress, but, you know, I think he believes it.
I wanted to wrap it up with what I felt really captures the essence of Two Bros, One Bunker.
Yeah.
As well as the military and America. and we'll play out with these two patriots. We're gonna have to change the music because it's Toby Keith. That's copyrighted. We don't have permission from him yet. He said he loves the troops, but he hasn't answered a single of my texts, hitting him up, or my emails, or my letters, getting copyright permission to use his music on YouTube.
So does he really love the troops?
Definitely not. But here, this is gonna play us out beautifully. The song that you're gonna hear, I don't know what it is, but I know it's gonna match up. This is America. Stay blessed, follow your dreams.